What is identity? Is it the passions and curiosities we follow? Or is it the people we connect to and love? Is it the history we share? Or could it be the values we are taught? Join me, and through performance and discussion, we learn to embrace our identities. To this computer. Yes, recording is in progress, and I've remembered to press record, unlike that wonderful Pink Suits one where we went 5 minutes before I forgot to press record, and that went well. But to everyone else watching, if you are now listening from the future, not from the past, if you're listening from the future and this is a recording, welcome to the sixth, I got it right, the sixth live Q&A, or if you're listening to it in the future, it's going to be a recording, isn't it, for the Embracing Identity project. Thank you so much for making it tonight. But most importantly, I want to introduce my guest to this one, Wajid Yaseen. How are you doing today, mate?
I'm good. I'm in Manchester. Just arrived because I've got various bits of work happening here, and it's fucking freezing. I'm so cold.
It is
But yeah,
absolutely atrocious how cold it's got so quickly.
yeah, it's flipping cold. I'm currently in the kind of in the cellar. It's converted cellar, as my brother's set up, and it's flipping colder still. So yeah.
Well,
Came out of
I don't mean to rub it in, but I
icicles,
must
yeah.
admit I am, for the people listening
There you
on
go.
Spotify or Apple Podcast, I'm currently sitting on a very festive water bottle to try and warm my legs up. So the magic of podcasting ruined that.
Solid, solid.
But okay, I mean, before we get going, would you just like to tell the viewers and the listeners a little bit about yourself, please?
Okay, so I'm Wajid Yaseen. I'm 56 years old. For whatever reason, I sort of like to
Yeah.
uh, get that kind of out of the way for some reason. Anyway, 56 years old. I was born in Manchester, a place called Ashton-on-the-Line. I grew up in Oldham
Mm.
and moved to London when I was about 18, and essentially was a bookkeeper. So as an accountant, really. That was my thing from my teen days and my work. And then, but I managed to get a job for a record label.
Mm.
And I just kept on getting jobs for record labels. So I kind of knew the ins and outs of how to, you know, balance the books for accounts for various labels, and essentially the access to that, you know, their records, the music that they were that were releasing, essentially shaped my sort of my palette.
Mm.
And over the years, I kind of realized that I really firmly, belonged in the other side of that creative industry. So the artists and not necessarily the facilitators of that. So yeah, over the years, I've gone into that. So I sort of then leapt into being a music producer. We released quite a few records, and got into Sonic Arts, and I now run Modus Arts, which specializes in Sonic Art. So I sort of now present as a Sonic artist, that has a foot in music production as well, but I kind of have a bit of an arm's length, relationship to that. But I can tell you a little bit about some of the most recent music production stuff I've been doing in
Yeah,
secret.
I would, yeah. I mean, the bits you can mention, I would love for you to talk about as well, because it's
Yeah.
absolutely blown me away how you've textualized sound and reconceptualized it into like a whole different way of like recording and creating an emotional soundscape and stuff as well. Yeah, I'd love you to speak a bit more about that, if that's okay.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, let's see where it goes, right?
Let's see where it goes then. Okay, so like for
yeah.
me, first of all, something you've already said there as well, when you were becoming a bookkeeper and stuff as well, and working with a lot of different record companies, I'm guessing that this was being introduced to a lot of genres, a lot of breaking out and breaking through artists as well. So something to do shaping your identity or shaping your passion and curiosity for where you wanted your life to go. Do you think it's important, and was it certainly the case for you that you're getting exposed to a lot of genres, a lot of different performers, so getting a lot of influences in which then allowed you to distill for your own personality what you wanted to become, what you would be curious about, and what your interests were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I mean, I came from like, a fairly small town
Mm,
and also a small, fairly insular community within a small town, right? And so moving from that to London was a revelation, right? So you get exposed to all sorts of different ideas about, about the world, about the cultural landscape, the kind of industries that I was involved in too. But just the exposure to differences and different people, different ideas,
mm,
and the kind of music I was listening to was, I mean, an absolute straight down the line revelation, complete drop jaw moment. So like I mean, a startling um a shock to the system to realize that music could be something beyond entertainment, that music
mm,
could have a kind of not only a kind of a philosophical um tinge to it, but that you could be angry in it, and that you could that essentially music could represent every single emotion that you could feel, and that music essentially could open up aspects of yourself that you weren't even aware of, right? So that was like for me, it was extraordinary. And I was fortunate to be working for a company called Sonnet that had a deal with a record label called Mute Records. And Mute Records, they, back in the day at least, they were releasing some really experimental stuff and exposed me to bands like Einstürzende Neubauten, this in German industrialists and
mm,
Nitzareb and Amanda Gallas and Leibach, and even, now probably people like Boyd Rice and Non, really difficult, but the great, I mean, all of this and entirely radical ideas about what music could be,
mm,
even the antithesis of music, just music as noise as music, which is, I think, which is the inversion of music in some way, at least the traditional form of it. And for that to be a sensorial experience in itself, to say that
yes.
that that music is sound and that it has its own cultural sort of maybe the palette or something. We're familiar with certain instruments, certain sounds, but the sound in itself, just noise, is a visceral experience that's as valid as anything else as entertainment. So the idea of listening to somebody making just straight harsh wall noise, and you listen to this in a dark room, was just like extraordinary. I'd never heard anything like it before in my life, So yeah, radical time for me, and they opened up a whole world that, way before I even decided to be an artist. The idea that you're exposed to this, that this existed in the world was yeah, hugely influential. Yeah, yeah,
Do you find as well? I mean, I know it's a really sort of interesting similarity and connection that the human voice, when it was first evolved, it was evolved for singing and long tonal one-off sounds. And as we've developed speech and language, this choppy rhythm that we do now that we understand and can respond to is actually a perversion of what the vocal cords were originally evolved for. And in a way, I found that music, I wouldn't say it's been perverted, but how, like you say, it's almost art becomes entertainment where things get categorized and broken down and become certain genres. So it's easier to understand. And then you meet some noise artists, yourself included, where like you say, it gets reconceptualized. It almost brings it back into a full circle. As much as the
yeah,
voice can be used for a single tone of singing, how sound and art and sonic entertainment evolves from being long music, like just tones, maybe a drumming, a tribal instrument or banging against a wall, down into these recognizable entertainment principles, and then bursts out again into all these subgenres of
yeah,
noise and expansive, like room filling, vibrating, super
yeah,
emotive, crazy soundscapes that are just made that, like you say, you're not getting the chorus, you're not getting what you might normally understand. But in that itself, it causes you to question and reevaluate what art, what music, what noise can be, what communication can be.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I think the psychologist Steven Pinker, he sort of talks about music as like auditory cheesecake, right? Do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't exist in nature, right? But what we've done in the same way, we now have like, we've evolved and created things like cheesecake, which play on our palates, right? We
Mm,
play around with the palate. I mean, obviously the tongue as a sense evolved initially to, to make sure that we don't imbibe poisons, right? It's a mechanism,
Mm.
but we over the years, over the years of our evolution, we've we've we bend, we play with that and actually derive pleasure from playing around with this little gatekeeper,
Yeah.
and I think music is the same thing, right? So it's like obviously like our sense of all of our senses, they are part of our, our the mechanisms that we have, the sort of the sensorial binding that we have to make sense of the world, right? Essentially,
Mm.
our hearing and our sight, whatever, is to make, to survive in the world like every other animal on the earth is, right? Is to
Mm.
make sense of the world and survive in it. And but we've now got to the point where we're living in these kind of condensed cities that have their own risks, whatever, but we're not really at the risk of dying all the time. We've developed these extraordinary things that take advantage of our senses in this very interesting, entertaining way, which is what music and cheesecake is, like right. So yeah, it's interesting, and I think kind of noise in some way that you're right. It's like a full circle. It's going back to that kind of almost the primary sea. I mean, like you think about the sounds of the seas or
Mm.
rain, whatever. I mean, we know it's white noise, and I think we respond to that in a very ancient way. I think noises feels like an ancient material,
Like even like I say, I don't believe in highbrow and lowbrow, but that's just a personal choice. But even with entertainment, entertaining music or pop music or how you want to categorize that,
Mm.
I've come across quite a few videos recently with a lot of songs, a lot of popular songs use the same chord progression or the same chords in every single song, and I do think there's something to that, or that almost the original soundscape trying to escape out of this popular entertainment that certain vibrations, certain sonic vibrations, the way they pick up in the ear, the way they resonate with the brain, with the
Yeah,
heart, with the spirit, which whatever you want to categorize it as, that suddenly lifts or opens the consciousness to a different level, even if it is in the form, and trust me, I love her, if it is in the form of a Taylor Swift song, or I don't know, or Tekka, or I just like some or Ball to Canada, some sort of like crazy noisescape where you're just like,
yeah.
what's going on here then? But it makes you feel. I think that's the most important thing. Do you feel this as well? Like the scariest thing in art will be that's nice or that's fine, and you just need to be whatever way it causes you to question, as long as it is making you emote in some way. That's an important step forward, because then you're questioning your own identity or questioning your own consciousness. Why does it make me feel this way? What is this doing to me? Why has this affected me?
Yeah, the thing about art, I mean, what I'm finding is that it's so fucking irrational. Like, there's no reason, there's no reason as to why one person is going to respond to one given thing and why something takes you and something that leaves you cold. Like I mean, it's like everyone's have their own taste in humor. Like
Yeah.
whatever comedian. Do you know what I mean? Like some comedian's going to really just get right under your skin, and it's irrational. It doesn't make any kind of sense as to why they make you laugh, right? And whereas they could be, leave somebody else stone cold, and it's the same thing with art, right? I mean, like there are some things that you kind of go, well, there are universal, art. So if you think about like the grand, big, Mona Lisa-esque stuff, all the kind of Rubio
Mm,
and Raphael stuff, I mean, like it doesn't really do anything for me, like, but it does for a lot of people, right?
mm.
And and fair enough. What I mean? Like I think that you can have this like grand idea about like what art does, but there's times when I've like there's once I went to an art fair and there was a kind of like maybe like a meter square painting. It was basically just white, right? And somebody
Mm.
just got a rope and poured white paint over it, over the rope. So you just sort of saw the outline of this
Oof.
rope and this thick, gloopy thing. And I swear it just stunned me. I walked past it and just went, what the fuck? Like it
Yes,
just hit
yes.
me and on a very visceral level that wasn't cerebral, right? It wasn't this kind of like it was just unreasonable. It just didn't make any sense at all. And I think that's the thing about it. I mean, I agree with you about like not assigning lowbrow and highbrow sort of tags, like I think Taylor Swift can have profound change in people, and it does for lots. Doesn't for me, but in the same way that lots of high art doesn't do it for me either. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
I don't think being in one or two of these categories exists. And of course, there are people who will pursue a kind of an elitist take
Yeah.
on it to really demonstrate their sort of aesthetics in the world. And we know how tedious that can get,
Yeah.
seeing that in other people. Yeah, honestly, I kind of I'm getting to the point of like, yeah, comfortably like art is utterly irrational. Like it just like no matter how much the artists will carve out a meaning and its intention, that it kind of yeah, very often doesn't hit that spot, but does in unpredictable ways. Um,
Well, I think almost liking it back to categorization, where if you give something a highbrow or a lowbrow notification or you genre it in some way, that you're feeling that you have some sense of control, not you, but people in general can have a certain sense of control over the art. But for me personally, I'd love to hear your opinion as well. Art essentially is a relationship with the greater whole. And in any relationship, it's the need or the want to be seen and see at the same time. And it sounds to me like this is what I get when I hear a lot of your work. It's what you got from the piece of rope that you're describing there as well. You felt so seen in some way and you saw something in that work that stunned you. And for me, I've had that in music, I've had that in cinema, I've had that in painting, I've had that in my own performances as well, through No Sense of Ego and seeing live performance art as well. That there's something that just, and it's not everything, and it's subjective, of course. It's we're some of our experiences or our
yeah.
learned identity or born identity, but there's something in there that resonates, and we go, yes, we feel seen, and someone else has managed, or some other form of consciousness has brought that into being, and we've gone, right, there's something out there that echoes with what we know to be true.
There is an interesting like there's a term that somebody threw up in a pub of sort of with a bunch of people, and it was like a postmodern martyr. It sounds a bit kind of like faluting in some kind of way, but there was this idea that as artists you report, right? That you sort of like
Mm,
go to the edges of something where most people don't go, and using your discipline, whatever that discipline is, whatever your practice is, that you kind of report what you find through the art, right? And that essentially acts as the facilitation for other people to um, not necessarily go on that journey, because the audiences can't follow that journey. They can't do that. But what they can do is see a pathway that's been led or created or carved out by you as the artist who've gone there. Now, there's pain that comes with that. There's difficulty that comes with that, right? But it's kind
yeah.
of it's in some way. I think the act of doing that is potentially a freeing thing for the audiences, right? So a lot of the times I really felt like when I was performing in my performance sort of mode, my performance era,
Mm,
that you're facilitating these experiences for other people to basically unlock something that they themselves feel, and they recognize that you as the performer, somebody on stage, are articulating some kind of experience that is difficult to get to in a pedestrian, ordinary sort of domestic setting, right?
mm,
And you've done the journey, you've gone through this path. Now everybody does it, in fact, because if that was the case, then it's the audiences who would be on stage. It's the audiences that would be reporting, right?
mm.
Um, so so there's something about that, about the sort of maybe postmodern martyr. Maybe the martyr part is a bit too dramatic, right? But this
I,
idea of a reporter, like that you travel kind of on journeys, and then you report, right? Yeah, there's something definitely interesting in that. But in many instances, like we also know that art has many different sort of functions. So you've got the kind of the idea of the social, the either the reflection or the critique or commentary of some way of like of anything that you see in the world as an artist. You reflect on it in some kind of way, right?
yeah,
Or yourself, right? But in many instances, that what I just talked about, the idea that you create something that is locked inside you, you unlock it, other people see that aspect within themselves too, and then they connect with the work that you've created, right? But in
yeah,
many instances, we know that like an artwork just also exists as a form of therapy for the artists themselves, and it exists beyond nowhere. They make this stuff and they'll burn it, and it has a million and one dead ends, right? And it doesn't go anywhere, but that's still functional. It's still I just think it's still valid. So all of that's super interesting. Like art doesn't necessarily have to again have this kind of weight of expectancy to it. Like it's not in most instances it does have a role, I think, maybe as this kind of as a way for society to reflect on itself in that way. But also, like as artists, you fucking just do it for yourself. And honestly, that's legit. You know, that's a totally legitimate way of operating. And it can absolutely exist and die of its own accord. You know, I mean, I think Gustav Metzger did sort of auto-destructivist work. You know, and like his idea was that you accent time and death, and decay. Like you
Yeah.
you you run that and love it, beautiful stuff. Even though it still had the social reflection, love the fact that it just this stuff was like at the mercy of speeded up wabi sabi. Like kind of
Yeah,
hurried
just
fucking decay.
well, I think that's almost like a critique on life and stuff as well. That we're all suffering, not suffering, but we're all bound into this ephemeral moment that we're only existing for a fleeting time. So it's almost a commentary on that. You realise through the art you're existing through your own mortality as well, and whatever this legacy is, whatever this is we leave behind, that it is be in the moment, be recognizing that we're all in here for only a short amount of time. But in producing the work, I would say, do you not feel that sometimes, even when you're giving out to an audience, or even if there is no audience there, it's almost getting and again, not with ego, maybe some people with ego, but getting a response back from the audience is almost like a resonance back to you, like not always a recognition, but an understanding you're complicit in starting this art, starting this conversation, starting this questioning, that when questions or an emotion is returned back to you, then feeds back into your own creativity, almost like a creative give and take, ebb and flow.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like in the same way that, I was exposed to that kind of that radical opening awareness about when I first experienced the experimental music or music that was outside of my domain,
Mm.
understanding that it essentially could paint this sort of internal emotional landscape that I couldn't access. I mean, that's always there. You know what I mean? Like you make stuff and you kind of know that it has that power to unlock this kind of complex multi emotional thing. We're not reasonable creatures. Sometimes you can hate and love
Mm.
at the same time, right? Like, and where's that fucking space? And so sometimes you can have music on sound or film or whatever capture that thing at the same time, that kind of ridiculous, unreasonable part of yourself, right?
Yeah.
So like, so that's there. We know that that's a constant, right? Like we make work, and of course, then when you hit that spot with somebody else, and they come up to you and say, "That, that was amazing, whatever,
Yeah.
beautiful. That's currency, that's fucking beautiful reward, So yeah, I mean, but there's also like there are instances where there's no way of tracking how people have been affected. And recently, I've been getting in touch. I've been in touch by quite a few people who sort of said, "Listen, you don't know the impact that your work has done." I'm like, oh, I forgot about all this stuff, right? Some of the stuff I've made about 20 odd years ago, they're like, or like, oh man, I'm still listening to the day and it's like still meaningful. I mean, like, the Scrapclub thing that we did, I actually
Oh,
talked about that with recently about some artists who are in Glasgow sort of looking into destructivist work, right? And so I mentioned this one situation where I think it was the very first or second Scrapclub that we did, which is, and to give you an idea of Scrapclub, it's essentially it's a participatory destructivist project, right? So we give about 150 people that come into this arena and they collectively destroy various objects with sledgehammers and baseball bats and crowbars, right? And we have sort of 8 people doing this at a time. Everybody observes them 8 people, and then everybody has a go, right? So it's a
mm.
circular thing. And one of the kind of sessions, we had a guy. We invited people to essentially explore the objects that they had a particular relationship to. Now, it's a slightly obvious idea to destroy the object you hate. It's a bit more difficult to destroy the object you love, right? And but in this instance, he brought in an object that he hated, and that particular object was a guitar. Now, the guitar was given to him by his father, who was abusive to him and to his mum. and we brought the guitar in and we were like, okay, well, let's see how we're going to respond to this. We plugged in the guitar. So everyone's doing the Scrapclub rounds, usual smashing, sort of fine. Moment came where the audience there is about 120 odd people or so, and it's one side of the room. And we plugged in the guitar to the PA, right? And you can imagine sort of a baying crowd going, smash it, smash it, smash it, fuck it up, and all this. And as that was all happening, I got close to him and whispered to him and just reminded him to meditate on the relationship with his father and how we felt about him. Spend his time, just ignore the audience, and you could just see his body just focus and calm down, and I could feel this classic idea about the room becomes silent, like a noisy room just suddenly becomes silent, right? And he spent a few minutes just meditating on this thing and was able to transfer this poison onto the guitar. When the time came, he just fucking just ruined it. He just smashed it against the wall, like absolute ripped it to shreds, right? Shattered the thing. And he, hands were like this, fucking trembling at the end of this thing, and we spoke to him about a week later, and he sort of mentioned that all of his recurring nightmares had gone. He'd basically for years been having these dreams about all sorts of stuff, and they'd gone, and he got a tattoo of the project logo done on his leg, like full on. He was massively affected by something like that. So yeah, and to this day, like he since has become a first, like an ambulance guy, like a first call
Responder.
ambulance
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
respondent, right. So he saves lives right now, and he's got a number of badges now and all of this business, and he's saying, look, that fucking moment is you saved my life, right? So
Wow.
like you can never underestimate like the things that we do as artists, whatever. That was a very risky situation, but we're not trained counselors. We're definitely not that,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
so
That could have gone
not
either
an
way. Yeah,
unusual,
yeah.
you know what I mean? And obviously, like there's all from any lens, Scrap Club can potentially be seen as being, a violent action, but it certainly isn't. But I mean, it has that potential, right? Like creating a scenario like that, or creating what I still see that as a work of art, right? I still see
Yeah.
Scrap Club as a creative project and actually an experimental piece of work. And yeah, and I think I've just learned over the years that no matter what you do, if you release the sound of a clock being played backwards and you really see it out into the world, you just can't predict like what someone is going to go,
Yeah.
that made that made the hairs on my legs kind of turn up. Do you know what I mean? So it's worth working and keep on working because you just can't predict how you're impacting people. And essentially, like, yeah, how transformative that action can be.
And this sort of plays into something I really do want to ask you because we spoke about it before about the idea of legacy and what you leave in the world. And also when you're creating work, not always focusing on the end goal so much because we don't know. Like exactly once you've released it out into the world, that's in a way our job done. We're simply the messenger or the conduit. But
Mhm.
then when it's released out, how it can imprint on other people and how
Yeah.
in turn maybe their description of it or when they pass it on to someone else or they listen to it at another time, how it imprints in them again. It's beyond
Yeah.
our sort of scope of understanding of where our work goes. But yeah, for you, like how important is the idea of legacy? Is it like to be known for it? Is it just more just if the work just carries on anonymously? Because obviously, not obviously, you've also been awarded recently, got an award for Tape Letters, podcast, independent podcast awards. How, getting that sort of recognition, does that play into your idea of legacy at all? Or is it more just like it's nice to be recognized like that, but just it's more about the production, the creation of work?
So when I first started making music, I mean, I was playing bass in a band before I actually started my own thing, right? And they had quite a following, so it was kind of interesting playing at fairly packed sort of venues, with a
Mm.
band that had a name and a reputation that kind of gave us a bit of leeway, right? So I'm kind of quite used to that thing about fame in some kind of way, infamy or whatever, the recognition.
Yeah.
And when I started my own thing, I was definitely into that too. I mean, like it was, really into the idea of that recognition because you think that that's the way to actually operate in the world. And the way the model was back in the day was like, you release records, you sort of get a name for yourself, you get invited to perform at various events or festivals or clubs, whatever. You increase the kind of the size of the fee that you can demand, and you get by, right? Like you
Yeah, yeah,
hope to
yeah.
get by. Do you know what I mean? And you got to have other jobs to get by, and all of that stuff, right? And you hope that actually fame. One of the things is that fame, regardless of the style of music you're doing, if you're doing really experimental music, still have the ambition to sort of be recognized within that field, to do something really interesting and contributing to the field, right? Um, so I was definitely driven by that. But since I've kind of got into sonic arts and understanding that there's actually another pathway for me to exist, and that really has come about through the Arts Council and understanding, first of all, the shift from me as a music producer into sound art, understanding
Mm,
that that's the thing that I was actually really interested in. And in fact, the music I was making was closer to a kind of a sonic thing rather than the kind of music production. And that's explains why I didn't sit too well in the music production world, really.
mm,
And realizing that there were organizations like the Arts Council that support people like me that were there, that was the thing that opened it up for me. And so as soon as I got into the arts world, then of course, like uh, same thing, right? Artists are going to be interested in doing that thing of getting the attention, having more money to stabilize and to sort of to produce work, right? That's
mm,
But now I'm so stable in that, given that Modus is an NPO, we're a national portfolio organization, and there's about 700 organizations that have that in England,
mm.
that status in England. We have a core funding to do whatever we want. Essentially, it's the golden ticket for artists. And what I've realized even before we were an NPO is that I'm less interested in fame. What I'm really happy about is for me to just endlessly fucking work and just make
Yes.
stuff. And I don't give a shit about like me. It's actually not become about me anymore. And it used to be. It's not anymore. And so I can't begin to tell you like the Tape Letters project, the podcast thing,
Mm,
won that award, right? And it was in the Arts and Culture Award, the Arts and Culture category.
yeah.
And we were nominated for another category too. I sat in a room full of a whole lot of people. And it was great, right, to get that. But I'm like, okay, fantastic, well done. All right, let's honestly not phased. Just really and not definitely not to sort of say that there wasn't a big deal. It's just that it's not getting to my head in the way that it might have done ages ago. This is just like one little just carrying on because there's a much bigger picture for me. Um and and actual production is the bigger picture. That's what I really care about. And in fact, and I can see I've got a really clear out plan for the next 10 years. So it's
Yeah.
just, so yeah, I'm not that interested about the accolades. Lovely and 100% love it. It demonstrates that we're on the right path. What I'm interested in is just making work.
Yeah.
Just keep on doing it, getting it, more complex, deeper, richer, wide, like collaborating with people who've got much wider skill sets than I have. Um, Testing myself in terms of like project manager, as well as artist, and where that line is between myself, and really through all of that, fucking exploring my own mortality, because I understand I will die, right?
Mm,
So, I mean, I'm definitely not driven by like a fear, like an existential sort of angst and fear on terms of like make as much before I die. But I want to definitely do as much as I possibly can, and keep on
mm.
making. But I feel fortunate that I can exist in this way, that I can exist in the world making which,
It
I
just,
feel very fortunate.
yeah, it's so interesting you said that because it really parallels to my belief as well that it's enough to be and not comfortable in a way of that you've become apathetic or melancholy, but in a sense that if you feel balanced, if you know that you're not working from fear or demand that if you don't get this sort of grant
Yeah,
or get this pay now, that you're
yeah,
going to be out in the streets. If you can have a sense of balance and then a levelness, then all the work you can achieve from there, you're building on a stable foundation,
yeah,
so to speak. And in access, in answer to, the tape letters, the stuff you produce there, that's it's the message, what you're talking about unwritten languages, about how we passed on our shared histories, how we pass on our own identities, really, chimes in with a lot of what I'm going through at the moment. And whether it had won an award or not does not affect the power and the passion of that work.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff you showed me recently has been like mind bending for me, and it like the way it's resonated with me, the agency you've given me with the piece of sonic work you produced for me to enable me to perform. You're an incredibly gifted and giving human, and I want to thank you for that. But also, I sort of understand what you're saying as well, that having that sense of balance and completeness then allows you to produce work at such a higher level, because there's not that worry or fear about what's next either.
Yeah, exactly. And and weirdly, it seems to draw more attention. Like working in this kind of way, like when you're not kind of when you're not when you don't have kind of fear.
Mm,
Well, for me personally, like I mean, I can only talk about my own personal experience, that I feel free of whether any work that I produce now is going to be well received or not. And so like it just means I can just constantly create, constantly make stuff, and through that kind of confidence in some way, like the only kind of what I consider to be on a personal level to be my better sort of ideas, the things that percolate, and they're the ones that people seem to find attractive, and funders like them, and well, for whatever reason. And so it kind of seems to be coming, like when I was making music back in the day, I just didn't know how to navigate, like how do I take advantage of the situation I'm in. So it was always kind of like this kind of expansion and loads of press and whatever, but I didn't know how to take advantage of it at all. Whereas now it's like just these one brick at a time just seems to be building this thing. And
mm.
um, yeah,
Do you feel as well that when you're producing work and stuff now as well, that is all, you say you've got a 10-year plan, which I find very interesting. I too have ideas. I try to manifest stuff where I'm going, have a point I'm getting to, but almost then it just becomes a 1 foot in front of the time deal. Because if you are too resolute on what the end process might be, you might miss out on those curiosities, coincidences, those little things, like you say, that percolate, that might take you off in a different direction. So it's good to have a sense of where you're going, but also leave yourself open to where you are right now.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, like it's not like I don't have like like an actual plan. Okay, by
No,
this
no,
point,
I don't.
it definitely isn't that. It definitely isn't that, right? And I mean, look, some of the kind of the projects we're running are kind of like some are what year-long projects, some are like 3-year-long projects, right? So it's a combination of all these things. But I
Yes.
can kind of see that, with us delivering them things, that we've got a longer term strategy, and so, yeah, it's something about that, and it's really like, to me, I think it's to do with the fact that we're not losing sight of the detail, like all the stuff. I mean, like it's incredibly detailed work. There's a lot of skill and experience that sort of goes into every facet and every nook and cranny of each of the projects. So maybe that's why, like we take the long route actually in producing stuff. So it takes a long time to get this stuff done, but it's resonant.
And in that sense, the sense of production, and when do you like when something's being made and produced, and it's like if it veers from maybe what your original idea was, do you try and bring it back on track, or do you just let it go to see where it may end up? And also, like when do you know it's done? Because it's something I always love asking
Oh,
other artists. I love that question.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mean, that is, it's a perennial issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, it's constantly want to like, tweak it, whatever. There's an album that I've been making in private, like that started honestly about 5 years ago, like some of the ideas of it. And back in the day, like when I was, making stuff, I was just like, I don't fucking care about it, just get it out. And that's
Yeah.
great, right? That's basically you learn about production and aesthetics and your own sort of, your own skills by just getting out and failing loads and and
Yes.
and being comfortable about failing publicly as well. Um, there were friends of mine who were music producers who were very afraid of the way they'd be perceived publicly, so they rarely released anything until they were 100% happy about it, and it would just take years and years and years. And within them years, I'd be like, oh, put this out, but let's see what we'll do the mix here. I'll try something else out. And I that was my thing, right? Whereas now this one particular album is taking years to make, and I'm still like tweaking it, and I'm
Mm.
still very happy about the fact that I'm tweaking it. Like I feel like luxuriously kind of allowed the right space because I actually am at the place where I'm comfortable to be able to say I want it a certain way. I want it a
Yes.
certain way. I've got the time and I've got the resources and the people around me to get it in the way I want. And if it fucking takes me another 3 years, I hope it doesn't. But so be it. You know what I mean? Like so it's okay, you know. In this instance, you know, there's other things that I just know that have a very clear finite end and we work for very clear deadlines. And, you know, I'm really make sure we don't go over that, over budget, over time, over anything. It's bang on, exactly right.
Yeah.
Deliver on time because it just means, you know, that it has impacts on other projects too, right? So, but with like, yeah, with this other album, like what's happening is that it's creating a richer and richer, um, it's it's mutating, morphing, and sort of expanding without it. It's not branching off and detouring.
Yeah.
It's expanding, right? And so it's becoming richer, much more denser, much more um engaging, like multifaceted, right? So it's not like veering off and like I've lost sight of what the whole thing's about. It
Yeah,
seems
yeah,
to be,
yeah, yeah. Not added loads of bits to it, and it's not even what it originally was, what you
yeah, it's
conceived
not
it to
that
be.
shape to it. It doesn't have that shape. It's getting stronger. And that's surprising. That's super interesting, you know. Like I've been in I was in a meeting yesterday with the Birmingham Electroacoustic Sound Theatre lot. The Beast is known as, right?
Nice.
Um, and it's a massive multi-speaker setup. So I think they've got anything minimum, like the smallest thing is like 32 speakers, right? Up to about 120 odd or something. Like insane.
Yeah.
The album is going to be performed inside that
Oh my God, I got to go. That's going to be incredible.
in the round, right? So we're not talking about like a you know stage.
Whoa.
It's not like loads of speakers in a PA. No, we're talking about like a sphere inside the thing,
Oh,
and I will have like I've got multiple aspects that are going to be diffused in very particular kind of ways. That takes a long time to get right, but
yes.
that's the way I want it. That's the way I want to do it. So um yeah.
Well, I want to come. Get me a ticket, mate. That's absolutely incredible.
You know, awesome. That's what I'm talking about. Like, fuck it, I can do an album release like that, right? I
Yeah,
can do an
why
album
not?
tour of you know, it's a spatial tour. So yeah, I'm letting on to something before everyone knows about it. Yeah.
But I just think as well that is almost. It depends how much you agree with the sense of control or where the ideas come from or are gifted to you. But I almost feel with that, and it's something that I've gone through myself, where you're almost the first audience member of the creative thing that's being produced. Like it has to be right to you. It has to tick all your boxes, so to speak. And you go, okay,
Yeah.
now this can be given out to others because it feels like in my viewing it, editing it, refining it, creating it, bringing it into being. Now it's right for me. As me viewing it or me envisioning it, that idea makes sense. That piece of music seems right. The editing on the video seems okay. Now I can gift it out to others or allow it out to others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, to be honest, I find that that this is not for everybody, but it's for me that I find it difficult to work with other people on other people's projects. Actually, for the most
Mm.
part, it happens in rare instances where I'm doing. There's a filmmaker called Alex Gabby,
You're
and he's
amazing.
the only filmmaker that I write the music for, right? And I've written the music for like I think 3 or 4 of his films, and there's something about his films that just gets under my skin and the way I operate and the way I can produce music, and all of it is original, all of it's like entirely new music that I work. And working with you is a rarity as well. Like I don't do it very often.
I
I
really
don't
appreciate
like to
that.
sort of like work on other people's projects or even have that kind of like collaboration kind of thing. What I very much like is to sort of have my own ideas realized and then bring in people to help me realize them, right?
Mm.
Um, and that's I'm very happy to be in that position, you know. And so yeah, I think that, but if you're commissioned to make some work, and obviously if people are paying you to do something, that's you know bread and butter. It's a way of getting by. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting thing about how much you present yourself as a creative, right? As a
Yeah,
facilitator, as a technician, or as an artist that contributes to somebody else's idea, or how much time you spend on having your own ideas realized, and they can exist in parallel. In my instance, it's more of my own work, and occasionally I'll sort of do stuff for other people. In some instances, I know people who actually don't like to operate on their own ideas. What
yeah.
they love to do is to actually make music or facilitate the technicians for other people's ideas, and that's where they thrive in them situations. And that doesn't work for me, but so yeah, I think you can chop and change from these things. Um, Depends on where we all are in our careers, I suppose.
Right, I do have something to branch off from that, but just before we go any further, anybody that's listening in, if you want to throw up a question in the chat, and if we can get to it before the end, please do so. I'd love to hear from you all. But if not, I'm going to carry on chatting quickly. I do want to ask you something actually about what you just said there about being commissioned or being asked to collaborate. I mean, I appreciate, oh, endlessly. I can't wait for everybody. Quick shameless plug here to see or listen to the music that was produced or the soundscape that was produced. That's going to be coming out in the first week of December, a soft call for attention. But when you are collaborating or being commissioned, do you not feel that sometimes you are still, there has to be a certain point where if you're hired or brought on board or collaborating, that you are still bringing some of yourself to the work? It
Oh,
doesn't, or, I mean, some people can be soulless, but do you feel that you're always, going to be, you need to still be there in yourself as well?
the only reason I would accept commissions is when the artists themselves, I recognize that the artists themselves are interested in me. So
Yes.
it's not like I can't write to a brief as such, right? So that's where my point of collaboration is. I've done it plenty of times in the past, right? I've done lots of that, right? Writing, but it doesn't like it's never it doesn't. I'm not comfortable in that space. And like I said, I've done it in the past, and I don't need to do it anymore. So I only work with people that are interested in the kind of stuff that I do, which means that there's a kind of an easy motion to it. You know what I mean? Like already there's some synchronicity, already there's some kind of easy conversation. And like with you and I, when we sort of sat with this and we just talked for a little while, got to the
Oh
heads
my
of it.
God. Yeah. Yeah. It was
And like,
amazing
and you saw
conversation.
how quickly that stuff that was produced on the back of that. That's what I mean. It comes from a shared understanding of about you understanding my aesthetics, me get to the core of what you're trying to get to, and it just flows on the back of that.
Yeah.
And if there was any kind of friction, I would just walk away and say I don't want to get involved, right? But
Yeah.
because I'm just recognized there was flow in this, it was super easy to produce the work and have something that was resonant that I knew that I hoped would be impactful for you. And as soon as you heard it, you were like, I got your responses. I clearly felt how you felt about it, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely always going to be some aspect of me as an artist. Of course, I can't be distant from that. There's always going to be me in there. But hopefully, the reason why you chose me is because that's what you want, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. That's
yeah,
it. I mean, that's exactly why I wanted to collaborate with you because it was you're authentic and true, and it's not using me as a filter. I wanted like exactly what happened, basically having that discussion, and then the work was produced, but authentically yours. It was ideas that we shared and possibilities we considered, but ultimately your voice, your expertise, your consciousness, your vibration has come through in that music, and I'll endlessly appreciate it. And once again, people, I can't wait for you to hear it. But I do have a question here, mate. Thank you for a fan from Jen. Thank you for a fascinating discussion on your creative expertise. What are your thoughts or experiences, if any, on the connection between sound and spiritual vibrational frequencies?
Uh, so um, so I come from okay. I'm not. I'm going to have quite a fairly long-winded answer. I come from a sort of religious community. I was brought up with that, and moved away from that. And essentially, I think the kind of transition from a religious framing of the world, I think the path to that generally sort of the stepping stone is when somebody becomes a bit sort of mystical. All right. You have the kind of slightly, um, you know, a spiritual, I think is just, the terminology a little bit, right? Rather than religious as such. And then for me personally, I transitioned out of this, of the spiritual, and framed anything that was um outside of the kind of outside of the usual, that would be posited in what would be spiritual, as actually just being something that was quite ordinary. Like
Mm.
it's normal to have these kind of quite profound uh experiences, because the brain's fucking weird. The brain's
Yep,
it's an
yeah.
extraordinary thing, and I think kind of spirituality, like, it isn't anything special. I think it's just something that we just don't tap into very often, because the circumstances of our lives, right? Some people do, some people dedicate all their time to it, right? But I don't think it's anything out of the ordinary, actually. And of course, the way through that is our senses, right? And because we are you know corporeal, we're bodies, right? And
Yeah.
our these bodies in time and fleshy, or fleshiness, we use our senses for that. And of course, it isn't, we've got the kind of what we understand to be the traditional five senses, right? But obviously, there's definitely push to say there's eight to about 22 now, apparently, senses. So
Mm.
we use our senses to make sense of the world, right? And that is all collated in the mind. And I think that profound sensorial experiences can lead to a profound uh spiritual experience. And
Mm.
so sound is one of them. Sound is one of those sensorial roots, right? And so, you know, so playing around with different types of sound can lead into it. The interesting thing is that you can have a profound experience from a song as much as you can have a profound experience from a single tone,
Yes.
right? Do you know what I mean? Like, and actually, a song can do that. It can absolutely derail you, completely shatter your sense of the world and reconfigure you.
Mm.
Fucking weird thing, right? But of
Yeah.
course, as someone who's interested in sound like myself, I'm very interested in, like, what is the root of any given thing and what is the root of music. So I play around with like low frequency oscillators and just play around with just pure sine waves. And if you combine eight of these in a single speaker, what the hell does that do? And so I've been, exploring things like tones and seeing, does it induce anything special, right?
Yeah.
Does it trigger anything? And yeah, you can get super loopy on like certain, like you just play around with frequencies, like pure tones. And for sure, like different brain. Remember, different brains, right? Not the same brains, different brains. We're neurodiverse and we're orally diverse, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Our
Yeah.
oral diversity means that we have different ways of pathways into that kind of sensorial world. Um, so you can create these kind of crazy like black holes of sound that have a kind of conceptual, like, um poetry to, what I mean? It's a beautiful thing. Also, I mean, even kind of weird experiments like transducer speakers, with essentially vibration speakers, right? Where you attach them to objects, and sound resonates through the object itself. And so, like, you can have, I mean, I started doing this thing of getting sounds transduced into the body. So I went through like a series of exercises of getting transducer of the sounds of ill hearts, right?
Mm.
So hearts that are not beating properly. And there's a medical term called auscultation, which is where basically doctors make an assessment of how ill, what's wrong with a particular heart that isn't beating regularly, right? So you hear the sounds of this rhythm and go, okay, it's the left ventricle. There's some issue with that or whatever, right? So basically, there's a series of ill hearts that's available for trainee doctors.
Mm.
And I grabbed hold of these sounds and stuck them in this transducer, and then stuck them on my own chest, right? So I had the sounds of these ill hearts resonating through my sort of chest, my breastplate,
Mm.
and it sounded like my heart was the ill heart, right? And and then you get this kind of strange feeling about, is my heart now suddenly going to try and sync with this ill heart? So there's ways of making sound not just spiritual but visceral, and
Yeah.
it's the same thing, right? So yeah, you can do lots of stuff with sound. Um,
And almost, sorry to interrupt quickly, but what you're saying, going back to that whole idea of speakers in a round and stuff as well, how that oral physical manifestation, the vibrational quality of how it passes through the body, not just through the ears, how you
yeah,
can feel music or tones on your skin, and how that can affect different people in different ways, which can lead to a higher spiritual or and some people it may be spiritual because that's just where their mind goes. That's the way they conceptualize it. But again,
yeah,
going back into art, it affects everyone differently.
yeah, 100%.
Amazing, amazing, mate. Well, listen, I'm sorry we are running to the end of time now, but I just wanted. Sorry, there were a few questions there. Next time, sorry, yeah, I got a bit long there, but I just wanted to thank you for tonight again, and also thank you once again for your kindness and your generosity with this time tonight, and also working with me as well. And I hope that we will work together in the future because it was an absolutely a transformative experience. And the
Oh,
way that people have already said to you how much you've changed their life, mate, you've absolutely changed my life as well. So I
oh
really,
man,
really
that's
thank
lovely
you.
to hear. Yeah,
Thank you, buddy.
cool.
But before we go, is there anywhere where people can follow you, where they can, connect with you in any way, have a greater look at your work? And then also as well, I'll put this all in the show notes. So if you're listening to this on Spotify or if you're on YouTube now, you can always check in the show notes down below.
Sure. So the main thing is really my artist's website, and
Mhm.
that's my full name. So it's wajidyaseen.com. And that kind of essentially kind of bit of an archive repository of all the projects I've done over the years. It's kind of, yeah, everything from music production to sound up stuff, and all the kind of weird and odd things I've done over the years. Um, and there's Modus Arts, which is the organization that I run. So that's modusarts.org. And then that kind of feeds off into all sorts of other projects there. So they're the main sort of two websites. And socials, yeah, I mean, sort of, I think it's Wajid London on Insta, and um, yeah, I
The
mean,
usual folly.
that's usual, yeah,
I'll,
the
fi-
usual.
I'll find them and stick them in the show notes as well. But I really
Yeah,
appreciate it, mate. Well,
great.
yeah, listen, thank you so much for your time. Stay warm.
Yeah. I've definitely I've had my arms crossed like fucking all the way through the talk. But yeah, I'll go upstairs and get warm. Yeah.
Good stuff, guys. Let's get warm. And to everyone else, the last live Q&A, I can't believe it, with Rhiannon OKA is next week on next Wednesday, the 27th at 7 p.m. So please get your tickets now, tune in. And yeah, thanks once again, mate. And see you all next week. And see you soon, mate. Have a good evening, all right? Stay warm.
Awesome.
Bye,
Okay.
mate.